this is the official start of the Economist event, and I'd like to welcome the Prime Minister of Croatia, Andrej Plenković, to join me now on the stage, and we'll have a conversation. Welcome, Prime Minister. Well, first of all, thank you very much for joining us, because I know you're on a very tight schedule today, and you've got a lot of pressing business to attend to. So let's get started. What are you're back in government for a third term? What are your priorities for the third term? I mean, we're 6 months in, but we've got some time to go, so let's fill us in on that.
Good morning, and thank you for the Economist conference. Thank you very much for everybody who participated in its organization. I think it's a symbolic date, the date of the elections in the United States of America. But we will come back a little bit later to that, I assume. When it comes to the third term of our government, I would say after having attained the strategic goals which we set ourselves in the first 2 mandates, in particular the strengthened international position of Croatia due to the fact that we have joined the Schengen area and the Eurozone, the only country who has managed to do this in the same year, in the same month, and on the same day. So far, with the European Stability Mechanism also helping us to have a safety net in case of any global financial or European financial crisis that may occur, plus the ambitions to join the OECD in the first half of 2026. This process is going diligently and smoothly, and our foreign minister is the chief negotiator, but the entire government is involved in the exercise. I think the major 4 processes which are key for Croatia consist of, as you rightly put, demographic revitalization. This is a structural problem of our nation, our society, and basically our future. Second is the digital transformation in order to catch up with more developed and more, I would say, in terms of education, in terms of industrial and economic development, countries that are far ahead of us, we need to catch up with them. And the third point, of course, is the decarbonization, because the investments in the renewable energy sources is the key for all of us in order to attain the goals of the climate neutrality by the mid of this century. And the final point is, of course, to invest in education. Smaller nations, unless they have educated young talents, it's very difficult for them to compete in the global or European market. When it comes to more concrete ambitions, this third mandate will be dedicated to increase wages and increase pensions, because these are the key issues. Once you have managed to go through the myriad of the crises that we had, of the biggest companies basically facing bankruptcy in the first mandate, the earthquakes, the pandemic, the Russian aggression against Ukraine, the energy prices going to incredible amounts due to that Putin's aggression against Ukraine, plus the economic pressure, inflationary pressures, social pressures. But we managed to keep the social cohesion with very, I would say, consistent, but also calibrated interventionist policy, which helped everyone, but helped more to those who the needs were really more in demand. So from that perspective, the third mandate should continue with the political stability and better economic and social standard of our citizens. Even your data regarding the GDP growth are indicative. Our assessment is that the GDP growth for this year will be 3.6%, inflation around 3%. The ratio of public debt in our GDP should go for the first time after many, many, many years, even below 59%. The growth of GDP, when I compare the moment when we started, and that was in October 2016, our absolute GDP was 47 billion euros. The estimates now, I understand the latest ones, is even more than we spoke last time, Mr. Governor. I understand it will be around 86 billion. So that means that we will be catching up even faster with those countries who are more advanced within the European Union, because in a nutshell, our internal mantra has been to catch up with Central and Eastern Europe as fast as we can, and to make up the time which was lost basically 25 years ago due to many circumstances, but that will take me the whole day to explain.
Indeed. Well, thanks for that. So, yeah, nice to see that the official expectation is even for even stronger growth. So there's lots of good news, and there's lots of success stories. Joining the Eurozone now a year later, Schengen. In our own EIU business environment rankings, I don't know if you saw this, Croatia comes out as one of the best performing countries in terms of improvements in the business environments over the past 5 years, and that's expected to continue, gradual incremental change there. So these are all good stories. Inflation is coming down, growth is strong, real wages, but the population here, as in many other places in Europe and in the United States, are not feeling it. We see both in the States in their election and also here in the recent Euro elections, it's this cost of living crisis. Inflation may be coming down, but price levels are still high, and they're going higher than they were before the pandemic, and that's going to remain the case for some time to come. So people are not feeling it, so there's a lot of dissatisfaction. And I just wanted to mention also, now it's 10 years plus since Croatia joined the EU. And like many other new member states, there's still an issue of corruption. I was reading a survey recently. This constant corruption scandals are having a kind of corrosive effect on popular support for democracy and politics in general. And again, this is a problem that we see in many places. So how can you address this and change this state of affairs?
Well, first of all, I'm very happy that your analysis about the business environment is welcoming vis-a-vis Croatia. It's better than you say it than that we say it. Second point, fight against corruption is a constant priority of our government. You can only fight corruption if the judicial bodies charged fighting it actually have some effects. Nobody has the mandate to do anything against the law, whoever it is. And that is my main position. If someone violates the law, he has to be accountable, and if proved, prosecuted and condemned. So the problem of corruption is a horizontal problem, not only in our society, it exists everywhere. It's not only a transition country's feature, it's also present in the more developed Western democracies. Unfortunately, it seems to be the weakness of human nature that is very difficult to address. But we need to let those bodies that are in charge of fighting it and have very high standards. We have had the action plan to fight against corruption. We have passed changes in numerous laws. We have elevated the higher, I would say, standards in the conduct and behavior of the elected officials. But no one can guarantee for someone else. This is something that I have learned over the years, but we are fighting it, and it is certainly the main point that we didn't get the confidence of the people to do something against the law, but work for the people within the framework that the law provides. So unfortunately these things happen, but we address them. We are in the sort of cleaning process, if I may say, and everybody else should be on the same line.
Thank you. Just to pick up on a few other things that you identified as priorities. You mentioned the decarbonization strategy, green transition, also digital transformation. So I just wanted to ask you about where Croatia stands in terms of the RRF funds, the Recovery and Resilience funds, of which Croatia is a major beneficiary. As far as I understand, you can correct me if that's wrong, about 30% of the funds so far have been dispersed, and obviously this program ends in 2026. You know, we just put together a chart recently looking at the performance in terms of absorption. You know, some countries, Greece, for example, I know Greece well, is absorption's about 50% now. Are you worried that it's not fast enough, that, you know, the potential benefits of this program might be, it might not be fully absorbed by Croatia, and what are the plans to accelerate this absorption rate?
Well, first of all, I think we have really put the oil into the machine. Croatia, compared to the absorption capacity of the first financial framework and what we have today, is a different system. First of all, we absorbed 100% above the financial perspective 2014-2020. We absorbed on time, plus the EU Solidarity Fund, which was 1 billion euros for the reconstruction of the earthquake hit areas, Zagreb and the Sisak-Moslavina County. We are in the process of absorbing the current financial perspective in a very much speeded up pace. And we are one of the most efficient countries in the absorption of the Recovery and Resilience Fund, i.e. the EU Next Generation. Greece, I think, was at 18% of the GDP when it comes to the funds that were allocated to Greece. The second country, in terms of proportional importance of the funds, is Croatia, with about 15% of the GDP. In absolute terms, that was 10.5 billion euros. Croatia so far is behaving as if we are in a more precise country than the region that we come from, meaning that we fulfilled everything on time. All the criteria, all the indicators, all the legislative reforms, all the actions that were supposed to be taken, and the absorption is actually very, very good. Perhaps you were referring to the disbursed, in a sense, paid. Yeah. But actually we are, in terms of engagement, I think above 80% of the total amount. I think only 2 billion euros are remaining to be either consumed through the tenders that will be out in the next 2 years. We have started the initial debates within the European Council, somewhat maybe in a narrow format, but some of us are well ahead, and if we do everything well, I think that we can even manage, as far as Croatia is concerned, to consume the EU Next Generation by the end of the 2026. However, that can't be said for the majority of the EU member states. And I expect that once the new term of the Commission starts, that we shall engage with Ursula von der Leyen and her team to see how the deadline for the implementation of the EU Next Generation may be extended. This will again turn into the big battle between the frugals and the beneficiaries, because the frugals don't want to extend it. That's why, by the way, the deadline was so short, because some smart people thought that many of the countries will be never in the position to spend everything on time. But we will try to do it within the framework that is set today, that we agreed in 2020. Plus, if there is an extension, I think we'll be easily consuming everything which was allocated to Croatia, which was an extremely added value to as an investment tool for reconstruction, for business, for economy, for environment, for health, for judiciary. In all areas where we spent money, we put an added value and accelerated the reform process, and also, as you rightly put, it has accelerated our growth. And so it's not only Spain, Greece, tourism, EU funds, it's Croatia basically doing exactly the same thing. When you look at the data for our tourist season this year, it seems to be it's going to be even bigger, both in terms of arrivals and the overnights, better than the last record-breaking season, plus the income will certainly be higher, and that seems to be a very solid position for the general data for the economic growth for 2024.
Before we talk about some foreign policy issues and challenges, just one more thing about the demographic revitalization that you talked about, because obviously, again, this is not a problem unique to Croatia, but what we're facing in many parts of Europe is an aging, shrinking population, a shrinking labor force, and that's going to weigh on long-term growth, on the public finances, and so on for the foreseeable future. So I just wanted to ask you, concretely about how you can, and these are very difficult challenges actually to address in policy-wise, but one thing I know that was put on the back burner was the raising of the retirement age, and when you're facing a very big, pension salary bill, it's great that real wages have been rising here and supporting growth, but what are the plans here concretely to address some of these issues?
Well, I think the demographic challenge is, as everybody who is a Croat in this room knows, is the biggest challenge for our society. That's why in my new architecture of the third government, we have a special ministry dealing with the demographic revitalization. I will also recall that back in 2019 at the Sibiu summit, when we were drafting the strategic agenda for the EU 2019-24, it was on the insistence of Croatia that the EU for the first time ever recognized the demographic issue, and then it was translated into the portfolio of the Vice President of the Commission, Croatian, Madam Šuica, who will now deal with the Mediterranean, but also remain responsible for demography. Basically, it's a horizontal problem for everyone. I think the biggest fertility rate across the EU is in France. It's around 1.78, 79. But in order to maintain the population that we have now, the fertility rate should be 2.1. Croatia is around 1.45, 46, which means that we are not the worst, but certainly not among the best ones, but everybody's bad. Nobody's doing well. So some of the countries are compensated with the immigration policy. When it comes to Croatia, we need two things. One, we need a changed mentality. The societies today are more selfish, more materialistic, more egoistic. Our way of life is completely different. The more we are developed, the numbers of the children in our families are less, not only in Croatia, but wherever we go. So this is the changed society. And if you look at the data in the 50s in Croatia, we had per year around between 90 and 95,000 babies. Now it's 32, 33,000. It's like 3 times less. So the numbers are as such. So in order to change that, we have prepared a series of policies which are cross-ministerial, and we are coming with all of those assistant measures that can change or motivate families to have more children than they had so far. We believe that the combination of these measures will create more conducive environment in order to have bigger families, but we can't guarantee it. Unless we change the mentality, all the measures will be there, they'll be helpful, but whether they will have a serious increase of population, it is yet to be seen. But it is going to be our key priority, and that's why most of the countries in the European Union are now expecting, even though this is a completely national competence, this is neither exclusive nor mixed competence policy when it comes to the EU, but it's a national one, that we should help the countries in order to address this issue.
Thanks. Is immigration, greater immigration, a possible solution to some of these problems? And what's the Croatian perspective on the new EU pact on migration and asylum?
Yeah. When it comes to the immigration, Croatia is focusing, let's say, on the two pools. The first pool would be the Croats from the countries that are close to us. Many of the Croats that are originally from Bosnia and Herzegovina are now living in Croatia. There are some data that more than 1.3 million Croats living today in Croatia through their ancestors came to Croatia from Bosnia and Herzegovina. However, that pool is being gradually depleted because they also have a demographic challenge. Second is to motivate the Croats from overseas to see if we can have them coming back in more substantive numbers. This is one of the priorities for the future. Some of them came, but what we also see is the trend that many of those who left Croatia due to the fact that we joined the European Union, as I said, 11 years and 4 months ago, when the barriers, meaning the working permits and the quotas were out, the qualifications and diplomas are recognized, the transition periods 2+3+2 are out for 4 years, and many of them used the freedom of movement of people to spend some time in another EU member state. This trend, slowly, without fanfare, I think we are now, when it comes to the saldo, how many people came to Croatia and how many people left. I think the recent data shows that more actually recently came to Croatia rather than left. So we shall see a two-way process. When it comes to the immigration, meaning from third countries, predominantly now this has been a process driven by the needs on our labor market. I think in total, the number of the working permits which was issued last year was 141,000. We currently have around 120,000 foreign workers today working in Croatia. It's especially in the construction sector, in the tourism sector, in different other services like transport, deliveries, etc. But the labor market needs those people, whether they are here to stay on a longer term or more in a transitory mode and going to other countries of the EU. I think many of them are more in the transitory mood. However, just as it happened in many other countries of the European Union, the more developed we are, the more people from third countries will be coming here to do some of the jobs at the Croatian labor market, but it needs to be well structured. That's why we have the new law on foreigners in the procedure in front of the Croatian parliament, which will, I think, structure, regulate this exercise better than before.
Great. I know we're pressed for time, but I've just got a final two. Maybe you can give some quick answers to this, although they're complicated topics. One is the question of further EU enlargement, including to the Western Balkans. Is there any prospect that the Western Balkan countries will join the EU by 2030, and is there a role here for Croatia? That's one question. The second question is what can we expect from the next administration in the US? Now, I think what I'm asking really is what might we expect if Donald Trump were to be elected for a second term? Because with Kamala Harris, I guess we can expect continuity with the previous Biden administration. Those two questions, and is a Trump administration one that Croatia can do business with?
Yes. Well, let me first turn to the enlargement. My main point is, thanks to Vladimir Putin, the enlargement process has been accelerated. This is the major point we all need to understand. Croatia is the last country to have joined the EU, and it has been already 11 years and 4 months ago. We have two groups, the countries of our region, the 6 neighboring countries that are actually physically within the European Union, because on their eastern borders, you of course know there is Romania, Bulgaria, and Greece, so they have nowhere else to go but to join the European Union. When will this happen? It will depend very much on them, but also on the political will within the European Union. What I sense today, there is a more expression of interest at the highest level of the EU leadership, also the European Commission. I think that the fact that 2 commissioners have had their portfolio of enlargement without the actual delivery of what is the purpose of the enlargement is that someone joins. So if you work on the enlargement, nobody joins. What can you show? You can show progress. But I think we should stick to the principle of the individual merits and the reforms. This is essential, both for the countries who were previously in neighborhood and partnership policy, and that was Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. We have seen the challenges of the electoral process in Georgia and in Moldova. In Georgia with one result, in Moldova slightly, in particular due to the urban and diaspora vote, other result. In Ukraine, where serious amounts of territories are being currently occupied by Russia, basically 2 of their regions before, plus Crimea, 2 more now, the war is still ongoing, but they're a big country, big system with unprecedented support that no other country has received, I think, in a similar situation, both when it comes to the political solidarity, economic, technical, humanitarian, but also military support and wider diplomatic diplomatic efforts. They're doing a good job in transformation. When it comes to the region, for us, the key thing is that Bosnia and Herzegovina catches up with the countries of the region who are more advanced. So we were very articulate and strong advocate for the European Council to pass a decision back in March to open the accession negotiations with Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we managed. This was perhaps one of the biggest foreign policy successes. Ministers know it wasn't an easy decision to have been taken, and I think we need to encourage them more. So it will very much depend on the reform results that will be happening in the countries. No one gets the carte blanche. Commission just published this week the new enlargement package. You can sense there is enthusiasm because it's a new institutional cycle, but in order to materialize, we need to work hard together. May I just signal that since like a year and a half ago, those who followed the enlargement process for many years and still remember the important and referential European Council in Copenhagen in 1993 with all the criteria, there was one element which was called the absorption capacity. I, who followed this issue for very many years, it's been a while that I have heard that anybody mentioned the absorption capacity. Now it's being put on the agenda, predominantly touching the two issues. The critical one is the budget, because the bigger the country that joins, the more repercussions on the redistribution of the funds to those who are already in. And the third element, the institutional decision-making procedures, impact on the number of members of the European Parliament, impact on the qualified majority voting within the Council, members of the Commission, if you like, a collective governing body of, let's say, tomorrow of 36 commissioner, how manageable is that, but who will then again agree to let go his or her own commissioner. You would have the first grade and the second grade member states. It's very unlikely people will accept that. So this issue will come, and I expect a very fierce institutional and budgetary debate whenever one of the countries is close to the finishing line of the enlargement process. On the US election, it's very ungrateful to anticipate today what might we'll be all thinking tomorrow this time. I was just looking at the latest polls. The combination of the polls says today that Madam Harris is 1 percentage point ahead of Trump, but when you look at the swing states, then you see that the swing states are leaning for the electors that will be electing President Trump or the candidate Trump. For us as Croatia, we have experience with both administrations. We have functioned well over the years, both with Biden-Harris administration, but also with the Trump administration a couple of years ago. We respect the will of the American people, what is, I think, in the interest of everyone around the world, that the United States of America comes stronger after this electoral process rather than weaker. The characteristic of huge polarization and very aggressive defamatory electoral campaigns that have now become basically the model. Now it's not anymore the facts, the truth, but it's how much you can portray negatively your opponent. This is not very healthy for democracy, and I certainly hope that we shall not be watching the scenes that we watched in January of 2020 ever again.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Prime Minister, for taking the time to be with us this morning and to kick off our event here. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for answering all my questions in full. I know that you have something to... Q&A in the Parliament and other ministers also on a tight schedule today. So please join me in thanking the Prime Minister.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move on as we started a little late. We are going to hear shortly from the Foreign Minister, the Minister of Foreign and European Affairs of Croatia. But before we do that, we've got a very short video message from Dubravka Šuica, the Vice President for Democracy and Demography at the European Commission, who wanted to address all of you this morning.
Dear Mrs. Coy, dear all, Thank you very much for your invitation to address today's event. Building optimism and